What is going on, everybody? We have a really cool video today. So, Storm Bowling, just like Motive, just came out with their core and cover ball guide to determine what are the strongest cores in their lineup and what are the strongest covers in their lineup. Now, there's one little caveat to this. You're going to notice this is only Storm. We don't have Rotogrip and 900 Global compared to Storm. We do have charts for those two, which will have videos coming out very, very soon, but they kept them all separate. So we don't know if the strongest Rotogrip cover is similar to the strongest Storm cover. We can, of course, make guesses, but we're just going to focus on the Storm ball guide right now. They have the most bowling balls right now. We'll cover Rotogrip and 900 Global in future videos, so make sure to subscribe so that you see those. But let's look into this. So first of all, shout out to Storm Bowling for actually posting this guide. Now, unfortunately, they didn't post it on their official channels. They posted it, actually Chad McLean, who is one of the higher ups at Storm, posted it on his personal Instagram page. This might have been posted other places, but that's where I've actually seen this. So that's where we got this from. So you're going to notice like the nice little the audio mute sign. That was because it was on the Instagram post itself. So shout out Chad McLean, the bowling chat over on Instagram, for having this guide. But let's dig right into it. So looking at this, there's a lot going on. First thing that we have going on is in this first guide, there is the core and the weights. So the weight block. So this is all of the cores that Storm has in production / has had in production in the last many years, in all honesty. There are some really interesting ones on here. So for example, the G2 core on the very top, the strongest one they have, has never actually released stateside. This is an only international core. This was on, I believe it was the Strong Bite and the Bite series from them, that is only overseas, not the BYTE, but the BITE. That core is the strongest one, but we've never seen it stateside. So there's a lot of very interesting ones on this list. So what I did is I have every single Storm ball that is in production right now to this day on both the left side and the right side of the chart. And from the top down, we have strongest to weakest for the cores and the weight blocks. And we have the strongest to weakest bowling balls based on their cores. So looking at it, we have the Ion Max on top. The Ion Max on here is this Element Max core. This Element Max core that my very tiny mouse is looking at right now is the strongest one in production right now from Storm Bowling. So the G2, the Super Coil, which was on the DNA series, the Rad 4 and the Rad X, which were on a lot of the Code bowling balls and the Lock bowling balls, those are not in production currently. Those are not in production anywhere. But we do have the Element Max core, which is the Ion Max core. Going down the list, Solarion right after it for the Equinox, Atomic right after it for the Physics Blackout. I didn't think the Equinox core was this strong. This is very surprising. I thought the Physics Blackout would be a little bit stronger. Very, very odd. One other note to notice here is that all of these are assumed to not have AI core tech in them. You're going to notice in future videos that actually, I believe, Rotogrip assumes that AI is in it, and 900 Global also like has AI versus not AI. Storm just has all the cores. That's all they have. They don't really post AI in here at all. So something good to notice. But we have Ion Max, Equinox, Physics Blackout. Those are three insanely strong cores, and they are also the earliest on the list. Now, the next point is where it gets very, very interesting, and it's where I'm a little worried / concerned about this chart. Next up is the Ion Pro. The Ion Pro has this Element Tour core. So if you notice, there's a big gap between this Element Tour core in the middle of your screen right now, all the way up to the Atomic. So Shape Lock, Torque, Sentinel, Aeroflow, Ignition, Catalyst, on and on and on, are not being made right now. So there's a massive gap in cores. But the weird thing is the Ion Pro core isn't that strong. Very low differential, very low intermediate differential. I see this as a weaker core than other ones on the list. What I'm a little worried that they're doing with this list is that they're just looking at the RG values of the cores and saying, oh, the lowest RGs go on top, the highest RGs go on bottom. Because you'll also notice that the Summit Ascent is below the Phase 2. Very, very weird that the Summit Ascent has a weaker core than the Phase 2, because it very much does not. The Summit is much, much stronger than the Phase 2. So very, very odd that they're posting things in this order, but we'll ignore that for now and we'll continue going. Going down the list, they actually keep the F8 core, which was in the Fate and the Journey, on their nice little core guide. Very, very cool. So you can actually use this for older bowling balls. So if you know your bowling balls, like a Fate, for example, or a Journey, you can look at this core guide and see, oh, the F8 core is actually in front of the velocity core. So the core wants to hook a little earlier. That's really good to know. Very, very cool. Otherwise, there's a lot of others on this list that we aren't even going to cover because they're 5 to 10 year old cores that we just have not seen stateside in a very long time. But let's keep going. So we had Ion Pro into the Phase 2, into the Summit Ascent. In my opinion, these first 6 bowling balls have very low RGs and are honestly pretty high on this core guide. There's a lot of really strong cores on here, but Summit Ascent onward, the Summit Ascent is actually surprisingly down here in Centripetal HD territory, which is odd to say the least. So all of these cover stocks are supposed to be, or cores are supposed to be stronger than that Summit core. Kind of crazy. But then after Centripetal HD, we have the core inverted FE2 tech. That is what is on the Road Warrior. All of the high roads of the past are in this core inverted FE2 tech. So any type of high road bowling ball that you have is going to fall in that category. Finally, the IQ is Centripetal 3 core. Or control core. So that is actually the lowest one on the list, actually second lowest one on the list for anything reactive. Right below it is the warp core, and that is from the lightning blackout. So the lightning blackout is actually the weakest reactive ball, excluding the level, of course. We're going to talk about that one in just a second. But the lightning blackout is the weakest core that Storm has in production right now. IQ is right before it, Road Warriors right before that. Then according to Storm, next is the Summit Ascent, then the Phase 2 Ion Pro, Physics Blackout, Equinox, and the earliest is the Ion Max. Now the level is on nearly the bottom of the list. I believe it has the Equalizer core, which is the 4th from the bottom. Apologies for the little presentation thing on the bottom. I have these in a weird category, in a weird format right now. Equalizer core is right above the Surge series, and that makes sense. It is an insanely weak core. Very, very weak, just slightly stronger than the Surge series bowling balls. However, you're going to notice that it is also very weak on the cover guide. Very, very odd because of where the ball fits and what it does, but we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about cover stocks. So this core side is very, very important to be able to understand where the core fits, how early it is, so that you don't need to know what RG means, what differential means, what intermediate differential means. You can just look at this guide, look up the core of the bowling ball, which is pretty easy to do. Go to stormbowling.com or just Google the core or Google the name of the bowling ball, and it'll give you the actual name of the core, usually very simple to find. And you can just find it on this list of, hey, I have a bowling ball that says it has the tensor core. Well, the tensor core is actually way below the Solarian core on my Equinox. So that means the Equinox hooks earlier. Now, the other thing to note is you have to combine these two sides. You can't just assume, oh, the core is strongest, so it's going to be the earliest. Like looking at the Equinox, for example, second strongest core on the list. However, let's get to this right side. It's actually in the middle. So you have to be able to combine both sides to see how strong or how weak a bowling ball truly is. That is something very important to know. One other good thing to note, the cover stock matters more than the core. The cover stock affects the reaction more than the core does. Both of them affected a ton. I believe the rule of thumb from a lot of people is cover is 70% of the reaction and core is 30%-ish, very big estimate there, but that is what a lot of people say, and that is kind of a rule of thumb of the industry. So that's something to keep in note, keep in the back of your mind as we go over to the cover stock guide. Now, the cover stock's exactly the same way. The thing to note here is they do not have the solid, hybrid, or pearl versions on this list. They just have the raw cover type formula. So for example, we're going to go down to R2S over here. R2S is what is on every IQ. So you have R2S solid on the IQ solid, R2S hybrid on the hybrid, R2S pearl on the ruby, emerald, and so on. So we don't see that R2S pearl hooks later than R2S deep solid, say. So we're just looking at everything, assuming it's solid, assuming it's in the solid category. So that's something very important to note because all Storm does is they manipulate solid pearl hybrid after that. So that is what we're assuming everywhere on this list. Again, we have all of the bowling balls currently in production from Storm Bowling on the right side of the list, excluding the Tropical Surges, of course, and excluding the Pitch Black and IQ 78. The urethanes are in a weird category. Looking at the list, Physics Blackout's on top. I completely forgot that Physics Blackout has NEX Pearl on it, which is the second strongest cover stock Storm has right now. The EXO cover stock was on the DNA and the DNA coil, and this one's weird. I'd like to argue with that one. It's so odd. I know Storm has it here. The DNAs were just so weird though. But moving on, TX23 is on here. That is just the updated version of TX16, which is on the phase 2. I can't believe that one's that strong in all honesty. I believe this was on the Fate, if I'm not mistaken, or the Journey. I believe the Journey might have had TX23, but either way, this is a very strong cover stock. I didn't think that. REX is on here. REX is the combination of NEX and R2S. And the one ball that has this is the Lightning Blackout. So the Lightning Blackout is the weirdest case on here. The core is the weakest reactive core, but the cover is the second strongest cover on the market for Storm Bowling. Very, very weird. That makes the reaction very, very interesting. Something good to note. But otherwise, going down the list, we have Ion Max on here. That is actually NRG, which is about the middle of the list. We have all the NRGs in front of it. Kind of shocking. The Ion Max, though, is really good, so something good to note. We have TX16 on the Phase 2 and on the Ion Pro here in about the middle, right below the Ion Max, so they might be closer than I've always thought in reaction. Equinox has A1S right after TX16. Summit Ascent has R2S. We get into the R2S boat for these final three. So R2S is near the bottom. Those are the weakest cover stocks that Storm has that are not on the Tropical Surges and are not on the Urethanes. So we have the Summit Ascent, the IQ Tour AI or the IQ AI, and the Road Warrior all in this R2S and R2S Deep category. So there's a lot of bowling balls that Storm has with R2S on it. Something good to note, R2X is down here, R3X, R3X and S. We have NRG Smooth, R2S Nano. Like half of the cover stocks that Storm has are R2S in some way. That's really what got them on the market and made them one of the best brands in bowling. So of course they try to focus on those. But with that, we have the level on bottom. That has RPM cover stock, which is one of the lowest. The control cover stocks are all urethane. So this is the lowest, weakest cover stock outside of urethane. Now, there is an issue with that where urethane is technically the strongest cover stock on the market. Something good to note because it hooks so early. So that is the goal of urethane. That's what urethane tries to do. But the level is still on bottom. So that makes sense. They try to make it seem like it's urethane, but they never mention that. Very odd. But looking overall at it, Physics Blackout is, of course, very, very strong, as we can see from this chart. Lightning Blackout is wonky. Ion Max, of course, very, very strong. Phase 2 is very strong, and the Equinox is a weird core and cover discrepancy where the cover is super weak, the core is super strong. It's good to know if you are somebody who prefers strong covers or strong cores. So I'd recommend using this chart to really determine where all of your bowling balls fit. If you're a Storm fan, an SPI fan in general, use this chart to lay out everything you have, your old phase balls, phase 5, phase 4, phase 3, your old physics balls, maybe your lock bowling balls if you have those. Try to see where they match on this chart to see if they fit where you see them in your game. But this is the overall core and cover strength guide as of February 2025. This is as of February, so for any new Storm balls, they won't be on this until Storm posts it. I have one plea for anybody who works at Storm or anybody has connections with Storm, any staffers or anything. Please, I would love to see this chart being released more often and in a more public setting. Having to follow certain people on Instagram is not a very good way to be able to show this information. And I know it's otherwise been shown on weird like private Facebook groups in the past. So please, Storm, have some way for us to view something like this, even make it interactive on your website so that we can know what the strength is. Cover stock especially, it is very, very hard to know if a cover stock is stronger than another cover stock, especially if you're new to bowling. So if anybody has any connections to Storm, please let me know or please let them know to try to make this chart more public in the future. Otherwise, I really hope this guide helped you guys out. I will have the RotoGrip and the 900 Global guides coming very, very soon. So make sure to subscribe so you can see those when they go live.